Three-time Indy 500 winner, five-time loser at marriage, worth $30 million. Only guy cheaper in the history of racing is Johnny Rutherford. I know I've tried to borrow money from both of them at 19%. Am I close, Unser?
Close.
Close. All right, we're going to do this a little differently because you and Montoya only last left. I think all the people that show up for this thing are race fans and hardcore racers. So let's talk about, I still think how you got an Indy car right is one of the great stories of all time. Bobby's racing sprint cars, and he's making it's tough to make a living, but you're making a living, and then you get a phone call from Parnelli Jones. Take over.
Well, Parnelli and I became good friends up at Pikes Peak. He was racing for Ford Motor Company up there, Mercury Division, and we became real good friends, and we practiced together. Nothing to do with the race, just practice. And that's when Parnelli thought that I should be running Indianapolis. And I didn't think I should be running Indianapolis at all. In first place, I didn't care, didn't necessarily want to, and I didn't think I was good enough to do it. And so he didn't talk about it much anymore, and after Pikes Peak was over, we both won that day, and he was running the stock cars and I was running the race cars. But long story short is I got a few weeks went by, whatever it was, a month, got a phone call, and I had a car to drive in Indianapolis. And I thought, now what in the world have I gotten myself into now? I for sure didn't think that I was fast enough or good enough to go there. So I went there with that car, got my driver's test, which was really important. To get your driver's test, especially in those days, that was about 90% of the battle. And so got that in real easy, due to Parnelli again. In other words, Harlan Finger.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Your buddy.
Yeah.
The chief steward.
The chief steward then. So at any rate, Harlan wasn't going to let me take my test. Parnelli
He wasn't going to let you take your test, even though you'd been a full-time sprint car driver for the last 4 or 5 years and won Pikes Peak.
Yeah, a bunch of times. And ran a lot.
Because in those days, they used to make, if you were going to be an Indy 500 rookie, you had to run Milwaukee or Trenton or Phoenix beforehand, so you didn't have to do that.
No, I didn't have to do that, but I had to run a lot of other races, a lot of major races, a lot of sprint car races and stuff like that, which I did. And Pikes Peak. And Pikes Peak was part of the circuit in those days. So wasn't much he could say, except that he made Parnelli mad, and that's not the best thing in the world.
So Parnelli had enough clout that he said, no, you're gonna get to take your test.
He just poked him in the chest 4 or 5 times, and Harlan understood. He was
All right.
a very smart man.
Now, and then talk about how that rookie test turned into the Novi ride.
Well, the car that I was in, that Parnelli lined up for me, wasn't very good. And Parnelli knew that. And so all he wanted to do for me was get my driver's test in. Get that done, and then the car's not going to make the show. And it didn't with anybody. So my dad had been pushing him into driving the Novi. And so he just fired a shot at the guy that owned the laydown car, and we headed down the road and stopped and talked to Granatelli about the Novi, and that was it. And he told me to go get my helmet and my uniform, and walked away real slow. And as soon as I was out of sight, I ran like
All right, you go out and run the Novi, and you do really good right off the bat, and it was not an easy car to drive. Now talk about your money negotiations with Andy Granatelli, what Parnelli told you, and what ended up happening.
Well, that was the cutest thing, because immediately I went fast in the car, which was really good. In other words, in the English language, they call it saving your ass. So that's what I did. And so I went back and to the garage and I put everything away. And I asked Parnelli, I says, okay, I says, Andy wants me to drive for him. What kind of money should I ask for? And he says, well, you're gonna have to get $10,000. That's a lot of money in those days. And so I says, why don't you come and go with me? And no, he wouldn't do that. He says, you go down there and tell him you want $10,000. He doesn't have anybody else to drive the car. Nobody else is going fast that have tried it. You're the only one who's gone.
You got leverage.
Yeah. So I had a lot of leverage, but I still was from Albuquerque without a lot of business experience. So I walked over to Andy. The garages weren't that far apart, and I walked over there and said, I have 10 grand to drive your car. He says, I'll give you 1,000. Well, guess what I got?
You got 1,000, and you were happy.
And I was happy. I went back and I was embarrassed to tell Parnelli. He said, how much did you get? And I said, well, I didn't do too well. He said, well, how much did you get? And I said, I got $1,000. He just shook his head and said, God damn it, I told you what to say.
But you know what? Guys didn't get big retainers like they do now. I mean, what was the first, was Goodyear your first good money when you became a Goodyear tire tester, Bobby? Was that the first time you got a decent check to be ahead of time, but without even driving?
Decent check. When I drove for Bob Wilkie, I got a little bit of money.
Up front.
Yeah, but very little.
But like a testing contract for, if you were the tester, like we don't have anymore in IndyCar, you test probably 25 to 30 days. Would you get $50,000, $60,000 to be a test driver?
Well, it didn't pay for the test driving. It was a total different way that you worked that out. For testing, you feed me, you only got $200 a day. No matter how you look at it, everybody got paid $200 a day. If you ran one lap, you got $200. If you ran all day, you got $200. But if you ran all week, you got 2 times however many days. And so that wasn't bad, but I did so much testing. I did hundreds and hundreds of days all over the United States. So that really amounted to a fair amount of money too. But then they had a little thing called contract money. That's where you put your name on the bottom of a white piece of paper. Well, that number up the top there got kind of big.
Because you were a good test driver. All right, tell people about 1968. Sorry. Let's talk about 67. Parnelli obviously is going to win the race in the turbine breaks. In 68, he's not driving, but the turbines come back. Joe Leonard, Art Pollard, Graham Hill. You're driving. Judd Phillips, you're the chief mechanic. You're driving an Eagle, a Dan Gurney Eagle, and everybody, including Mario Andretti, has already surrendered and said there's no way we can beat the turbines. They're going to kick our ass. We give up. Tell everybody here what you thought going into the race, and 20 laps, 30 laps into the race, what you realized, what you thought was probably true.
Well, we kind of halfway. I had the fastest piston engine car in that race by a fair margin. And the closest one to me, I guess, was probably Lloyd Ruby. What's your name? Probably Lloyd Ruby. He was always fast. And he had almost the same car I did. He had the turbo off. He had the turbo off. He had good stuff, like I did. And so I knew Lloyd was going to be tough. The turbines, I figured, were just going to run away with us. I just didn't think that we were going to have much of a contest there. But then after about, well, let me back up just a little bit. Before we even qualified for the race, Vince, that's Andy's brother, and Andy and little Vince, that's Andy's son, got me over where the tower is, where the scoring tower is, and right in front of the racetrack. And they kept trying to hire me out from under Goodyear. Now Goodyear was paying me a fair amount of money. I think it was a lot. They thought it was too much. But by the same token, it was a good fair amount of money. And besides that, Bobby Unser wouldn't go back on his word anyway. Whatever I say is what I do. But they got me out there, and they just kept raising the price, because they figured if they killed my team, that they'd have at least 3 good turbines running that could win a race.
Are we talking, when you say a lot of money, we're talking $100,000?
I'm not there yet. It got a little bit more than that.
Now think about that in 1968.
Before I left that scoring tower out there, it got up to be $1 million in 1968. That was a lot of money. And I never saw that much money all my life up to that point. And so I still turned it down because I had to deal with Goodyear. And what was so funny is you look, standing out there at the scoring tower, and you look in towards the infield, towards the garage area, and Firestone has the building on one side, Goodyear has it on the other side. All the Firestone guys were standing out there staring at us. Of course, the Granatellis were doing their typical thing of screaming. They couldn't talk. They had to scream when they talked. And they're both good friends, and I really liked them both. But at any rate, I just kept saying no and kept saying no, and they just kept raising it to $100,000 at a time. And pretty soon they got tired of being told no and just says, all right, $1 million. I just don't have any more talk. I said, okay, I'm still finished. I'll see you later. I ain't going to take the $1 million. I'm going to run for Goodyear, and that was it. And the good thing about that whole thing was I beat him.
But now talk about when the race starts, when you think maybe you suddenly, it's not such a stacked deck, maybe you do have a chance.
Well, when the race started, Robin, I told you it was like all the other drivers. I knew that I was just going to be waxed. They were going to run away, and my concentration was on like Lloyd Ruby and Mario and stuff like that, Floyd. Those guys, that's where my concentration was. So then after, I think it was around 8 laps, I'd be running there, and all of a sudden I can gain on Leonard with a turbine pretty easy. And I wasn't even running real hard. So somewhere around the 8th lap mark, I said, well, what the hell, I'm gonna wake him up, because he's just not running fast enough. And so when I go by him, he'll get awake. And so I blew him off, and of course he tried to wake up, but I saw right away it didn't make any difference. He wasn't going to go any faster, and I could run that speed all day long. It didn't make any difference. Still about the same speed that I'd qualified at. Now, I know you read the stories and said we were poking nitromethane in it to make more power, which was legal, and I did do it during qualifying. But during the race, we never ran any nitro in the thing, and I could still outrun.
Did you outrun him in the straightaways or the corner? Was he still better in the corners, Bobby? Or?
No, I beat him in the corners. I beat him in everything. But what happened to the horsepower, we didn't know this, because with the Granatellis, everything's a big secret. And so what had happened is that Andy thought he had us, let's just say, to pick some strange number, 20%. Said, I've got all the piston cars beat by 20%. That's kind of how he was thinking. So he made a deal with Standard Oil and to use gasoline. They wanted to advertise the gasoline. Well, what gasoline does to a turbine engine compared to turbine oil in the engine, or like diesel is what they run, is when you run gasoline, the turbine's going to run real hot, and they have to cut back the power. They run turbine oil, they can crank the power up, and it's just going to be normal. They run for the rest of their life. Wow, these turbine engines run forever. And so when he put the gasoline in it, that doomed him. And he was counting on myself and Ruby and McCluskey and people like that slowing down so he could afford to do a little bit. Well, it didn't work. I was running the same speed and smoked him off really good. And then he had no way to pass me. In fact, it wasn't one time during the race that he ever passed me, except when I was in the pits.
And if you hadn't had gearbox trouble, he might not have been ahead at the end when he broke.
No, I'd have been a lap ahead of him. I would have easily lapped him.
You'd have lapped the turbines.
Oh, easy. Yeah.
That's still one of the biggest roars I think I ever heard at Indy was when Joe Leonard, they restarted the race and Joe Leonard's car quit and he coasted into turn 1 and you went by and took the lead. Because it was really a divided, I mean, the fans didn't, some fans liked the turbines, but most of them, for whatever reason, didn't like it because they didn't make much noise. So it was this huge ovation. So you win the 68.
Even in the race car, I heard the feet stamping, the chairs stamping. I mean, even in the race car, when you're running hypothetically 200 miles an hour, I still could hear it. I thought, wow, this is a big deal.
Okay, so you win your first Indy 500, and I think what people